there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
It's just stuff that you would think that, in 2024 people would steer clear of. And certainly not the sort of thing you'd normally hear at a venue in New York City. So yes, that was slightly puzzling.
Times' New York correspondent Will Pavia has just left the Trump rally we've been talking about over the last hour and can join us now with an update. Hi there, Will.
Hey.
Hi, welcome. What was the atmosphere like there at Madison Square Garden? You've got a lot of people who are very excited, but also, as ever with these things, I'm seeing pictures online of people leaving early.
Yes, I mean, that did happen. I think people had queued up. I mean, some of them have been here since yesterday. They set aside two east-west sort of cross streets between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue for people to queue up in. So those were completely filled with people. It was quite an extraordinary sight to see, just down from the Empire State Building, essentially a canyon full of Trump hats. And so the place filled up and people were inside by about 2 o'clock. So they spent a lot of time standing, and then there was hours and hours of sort of support act kind of speakers, I suppose, before Trump arrived. And he didn't really get on until about 8 o'clock in the evening. And, initially there was a lot of energy for him and a lot of laughter at some of his kind of stranger asides, and a lot of, there was a lot of cheers for some of the things he pledged to do. But people were leaving, after about half an hour or so. The area that I was in was sort of emptying out. So yes, I think the energy gradually dissipated, and perhaps it was asking a lot of people to spend quite that much time in an arena.
And in terms of New York as a city, how do they vote? I mean, how popular is Donald Trump there? Is this a minority of people who would be swamping out Madison Square Garden?
Yes, it's a strange thing to see this many Trump supporters in Manhattan, in the middle of Manhattan. I mean, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like 14% Republican in Manhattan the last election. Now, some of the Staten Island votes Republican and has a Republican congresswoman. And then, there are some sort of parts of Queens that are a little bit redder. But it is, for the most part, a very liberal city. And when you see someone in a red hat, normally you sort of stop because you're not very used to it. So it was a strange thing. A lot of the people that I sort of met queuing up were, from Queens, or they were from Connecticut or New Jersey, and they talked about the long journeys they'd had to get in. So it did feel in some respects like, people coming into a sort of a place that was almost like foreign to the Republican Party in a way, and not somewhere that they would normally focus on, because it's not really a swing state, even though Trump promised everybody that it was.
And also not an audience that all looked entirely the same either. I mean, something I can see just from, who's going in and out of there demographically on the feed that I'm looking at is, there are some Latinos, there's some African Americans, there are visibly observant Jews, etc. And yet some of the response that I'm seeing online to what happened there regarded some racist remarks that were made by speakers before Trump came to the stage, some of his warm-up acts, who were sort of making basically racist jokes.
Yes.
I know America's a different country, and, they do a lot of culturally sensitive material there, which often to the English ear just frankly sounds racist, but it does seem to have gone down badly, including with some Republicans in Florida, where the Latino vote is very important.
I mean, it's very surprising to have that at a track, especially when you're, 9 days away from an election. I mean, I suppose what they will say is that this guy was not, he was the comedian that they'd booked.
It's Tony Hinchcliffe made the remark.
Yeah. It was very strange. And sorry, there's a lot of sirens going up 6th Avenue. And there were one or two other remarks. Someone described Kamala Harris as being Malaysian via California or something, and made some slightly sort of, it's just stuff that you would think that, in 2024 people would steer clear of. And certainly not the sort of thing you'd normally hear at a venue in New York City. So yes, that was slightly puzzling. I have to say, Trump sort of, his rhetoric is also can be pretty fiery. I mean, at some point he got the largest cheer, or one of the largest cheers, when he said that he would automatically have the death penalty for any migrant that killed an American citizen. So there was there was sort of a, there was quite a lot about ending the migrant invasion and this kind of thing, which was a sort of seen as a sort of red meat line for his supporters, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's very surprising that kind of rhetoric was there as well.
I mean, it just seems a strange, we're talking about it like it's a decision. It may well have just been an off-the-cuff remark by a comedian who they booked, to be fair. But it seems like a strange thing because it's going to now be part of the news agenda, isn't it? Are Latino Republicans turning away from Trump at the very moment? He really would not want that, surely, to be the story.
No, of course not. No, I mean, the whole point of this was that this was the triumphant return to the city where he was indicted and in fact convicted. And that was certainly, most of the speakers were trying to sort of make that point, that who would have thought that Donald Trump would come back here, of all places. And people like Tucker Carlson, who is sort of known for fairly kind of for rhetoric that's not cautious, sort of talks about Trump like being like the sort of person who gets thrown out of a bar, and all his friends are still inside and he comes back anyway. So I don't know. I certainly think that's certainly not what Trump or his advisors would have looked for. And I'm sure if it does overshadow what's reported, they'll be very cross about it. He did also spend a lot of time attacking the media, and sort of calling them the fake news media, and everyone sort of turned and gave their middle finger to the press.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all par for the
too.
course with him, isn't it? But what was the thing? I mean, as it just so happens, I've got Matteo Bergamini with me, who's a journalist and a campaigner at Shout Out UK, who talk about disinformation. So I'm just curious, can you remember an example of something that he was claiming was fake?
Oh, you're asking me? Sorry.
Yeah. Was there something in particular that he was getting the crowd riled up about being fake news?
Well, he talked about the debates that he had with Kamala Harris, where where David Muir jumped in and said crime was down and not up, and he said he sort of claimed that actually crime was up and that he was vindicated the next day. So I'm not sure, and that's entirely true either, to be honest. But he sort of made a big show of the idea that the press was not fair, and that having a fair press was half the battle. He didn't sort of alight on that many specifics. He very often suggested that the press elided mistakes that Harris had made. There was a long sort of discourse about when apparently he said that her teleprompter had failed and that she'd almost had to stop speaking and had nothing to say and couldn't speak off the cuff. But of course, the media wouldn't report on that. It was that kind of thing, really. I wouldn't say sort of necessarily hugely substantive stuff, but yeah, I mean, he has always enjoyed attacking the press, and it's something that he does at most of his rallies.
Indeed. Okay, thanks so much for that update, Will. Really appreciate your time. Will Pavia there, the Times' New York correspondent who's just left the rally at Madison Square Garden. A historic moment for him, whatever happens in the election, as Will was saying, that he's returned to New York City. And even though some people have left early, and even though it did go on for ages, nonetheless, did have this triumphant return where you have a massive crowd of people who absolutely adore him. Matteo, I mean, listening to that, I was thinking about when Will was saying that Trump accuses the media of lying and false narratives being pushed, to be fair to him, there was something of a conspiracy of silence around Joe Biden's ability to string a sentence together, wasn't there, for some time, which probably didn't help. I mean, if you're predisposed to think that the other side, in this case, the Democrats or the Democrat-leaning news organizations, aren't being entirely honest about their prospects, there was a case right in front of us where you had someone who shouldn't be standing for president again because he didn't have the capacity to do it, and they were saying he was absolutely fine.
No, definitely. I think it's an interesting example, because do you, in that instance, blame the media or the people behind the then Joe Biden campaign? Because what was being reported on was effectively what the campaign was saying about him, rather than the media saying itself, oh, this person's fine, etc., etc.
Well, no, that's a classic thing that I do remember for many weeks, seeing footage on social media of Biden awkwardly shuffling around, facing the wrong direction when he was supposed to be talking to a crowd, taking ages getting down a flight of stairs and then forgetting where he was. I remember seeing all that on social media and not being reported in the mainstream media because I think people thought it was disrespectful, or they didn't want to speculate about his physical health. And then, 2 months later, hey presto, he's standing down.
I think he also called the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin.
He did
I think
that. That one did make the
at the
headlines.
NATO.
Yeah.
That one, I mean, of two names that you could confuse was but no, I think there is one thing where you are not reporting something or not making light of something because, as you say, it's potentially seen as disrespectful, and arguably maybe world leaders shouldn't be afforded the same respect as you would necessarily another individual that was going through health declines because of age or stress or whatever else. So I definitely think there is an element there, but that is different to saying that the news media are fake news and the kind of the campaign of discreditation that has been going on basically since the Trump campaign kind of came into the political limelight. And that is part of the idea of, again, discrediting legacy voices or legacy organizations that have a track record of being factual in what they're attempting to report. For the most part, obviously, organizations make mistakes like anybody. But discrediting it completely to the point where, oh, these are propaganda machines or these are fake news machines that are pushing out certain narratives, etc. Because what you're then doing, and what we see with a lot of disinformation campaigns, for example, it's not necessarily about making someone believe an alternate narrative. It's not the same as propaganda necessarily, but it's about discrediting any mode of information so that you kind of get into this nihilistic mentality that nothing you're hearing is true. No media is telling you the truth. So you've got to kind of go down to your basic biases and instincts. And that can be a very dangerous road because then you come across someone that is saying all the kind of things that you want to hear, that all your biases, that your internal biases that you never really show are kind of aligning with. And then you kind of respond positively to that. So I think the two are slightly different.